You might be sitting there, right now, in a room full of soft light and realizing something profound. You are alive, but you cannot feel it. The volume has been turned down on your entire emotional landscape. The old pain, the anxiety, the sharp sting of sadness, it seems to have retreated, but in its place there is only a vast quiet space, a void. This emptiness is not a problem with your character. It's a strategy, a survival strategy that has run past its expiration date. We talk so much about the intensity of negative emotion, about panic and depression, but the most insidious form of modern suffering is often the absence of feeling itself. It's the sense that the color has drained out of your life, leaving everything in shades of muted gray. You aren't necessarily sad. You are simply not present. This is what clinicians often refer to as emotional numbness, or, when it comes to pleasure, anhedonia, the inability to anticipate or experience joy. The common misconception is that this hollow feeling is a flaw, a sign that you are somehow broken or ungrateful for the life you have. After all, the lights are on. You are high functioning. You are meeting your deadlines, paying your bills, perhaps even maintaining a successful social facade. But inside, there is a profound silence. You are disconnected from the very core of your experience. It's difficult to connect deeply with others because you can't access the depth within yourself. You feel isolated, even when surrounded by people who care. This numbness is not a single issue. It is a tapestry woven from several deep, protective psychological mechanisms. For many people, especially those in the American work culture, this emotional shutdown is a direct consequence of constant overload. Our systems were never designed for the perpetual low-level stress of the digital age. They were built for brief, intense threats. When the threat is chronic, a demanding job, an unstable relationship, financial worry, the mind eventually defaults to a power-saving mode. It simply says, I cannot process this volume of feeling anymore, and so it shuts the system down. The pain here is twofold. First, the lack of feeling itself. Second, the fear of that lack. The fear that you might never feel passion or deep love again. That the authentic you has vanished, replaced by a kind of automated functional ghost. This is the quiet tyranny of the neutral zone. You are safe from the lows, but you are also forever locked out of the highs. In psychological terms, this protective mechanism can be a symptom of various mood and trauma-related disorders, from persistent depressive disorder to dissociative conditions. But we don't need a formal diagnosis to understand the mechanism. Your mind is trying to save you from drowning in too much emotion, and its rescue tool is silence. We need to look deeper into the architecture of this silence and understand what it truly protects you from. Because what you have lost is not just happiness. You have lost your connection to your internal compass, the passion and values that define you, and that is where the erosion of self begins. Imagine for a moment the emotional landscape as a vast plain in winter. In the early stages of life or intense stress, that landscape was turbulent, raging rivers of frustration, sharp cliffs of anger, warm springs of joy. But then, a severe, prolonged winter set in. Your emotions, those flowing rivers, did not die. They simply froze over. This is the landscape of frozen water. You are standing on this frozen surface. It is hard, stable, and perfectly safe. You can walk across it without fear of being swept away by the current. But the current, the essential movement, the life force of your true feelings, is trapped, rigid, and silent beneath the ice. This state allows for remarkable functional consistency. You are predictable, you are reliable, and you are rarely messy. This is why many people who experience emotional numbness are actually quite successful professionally. They have achieved a form of emotional homeostasis that prioritizes stability over vibrancy. Think of Sarah, a marketing executive in Chicago. She was excellent at her job, calm under pressure, always delivering, but she hadn't cried in 3 years, not even when her favorite aunt passed away. She found herself staring at the sunset over Lake Michigan, which should have been breathtaking, and feeling only a polite, intellectual appreciation. The internal response, the awe, the longing, was gone. Sarah wasn't depressed, she was simply inert. Her entire system had entered a low-power mode to cope with the relentless, unyielding demands of her career and her personal life. The cinematic quality of this state lies in the profound contrast between the external world and the internal experience. The world is vivid, loud, demanding reaction. But inside Sarah's mind, the lights are dimmed. The internal monologue is muted. She is participating in the film of her life, but only as a detached observer in the balcony, watching the action unfold without the power to step onto the stage or feel the plot's tension. This detachment, this sense of standing back from yourself, is one of the most painful markers of emotional numbness. You lose the authentic, messy engagement required for deep human connection and meaning. You become a perfectly polished but empty shell. This frozen landscape offers immediate relief from pain, but at the ultimate cost of genuine selfhood. To understand why the lights go out, we have to look not at a failure of spirit, but at a physical mechanism, specifically the brain's reward system. The numbness you feel, especially the anhedonia, is often traceable to how your brain processes dopamine. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical, as often oversimplified. It is the anticipation chemical. It is what drives you forward. It's the neural currency that says, this is worth pursuing. When you feel enthusiasm for a project, a conversation, or a simple cup of coffee, that is dopamine signaling the expectation of reward. In conditions of chronic stress, like constantly being overwhelmed by work or school, as mentioned in the original context, reason 6, or following sustained emotional trauma, this system becomes fundamentally exhausted or dysregulated. Research suggests that constant demand forces the system into a kind of compensatory overdrive and eventually exhaustion. The dopamine pathways, the neural highways responsible for delivering that sense of motivation and spark, become less sensitive. Think of it as the broken volume dial. The potential for joy, excitement, or even curiosity still exists, but the neural dial that controls the volume of those feelings is damaged. When a truly good thing happens, a promotion, a beautiful piece of art, a loving gesture, the signal arrives, but the dial is stuck on 0 or 1. You register the event intellectually. This is supposed to be good, but the visceral embodied feeling is absent. This isn't just about depression, although it is a core feature. It's about a protective biological shutdown. The constant influx of overwhelming emotions, frustration, loneliness, despair, as the original script noted, is too much for the brain to process all at once. According to many studies in neuroscience, the brain opts for safety. If it can't handle the painful signal, it often lowers the sensitivity of all signals just to maintain equilibrium. This survival mechanism creates a safe, but ultimately sterile existence. Your brain is trying to rescue you from drowning, and its tool is silence. But that silence has inadvertently muted the entire spectrum of human experience. This biological mechanism is the foundation upon which the deeper psychological walls are built. When the neurological system performs its shutdown, the mind follows suit, constructing a powerful psychological defense. We need to look at reasons 3 and 4 from the original context, trauma, and abuse, because the resulting numbness is one of the most sophisticated survival tools the psyche possesses. Clinicians refer to this protective response as dissociation or emotional blunting. When you experience something overwhelmingly traumatic, whether it's acute violence or chronic, subtle emotional neglect, the mind has two choices: process the pain fully and risk collapse, or fragment the experience and wall off the feeling. The psyche often chooses the latter. This numbness becomes the protective wall. It is built brick by brick with the raw material of unprocessed stress and pain. When a child is constantly criticized or abused, as noted in Reason 4, their nervous system learns that feeling their emotions, anger, sadness, fear, is dangerous because it might provoke further punishment or rejection. The safest thing to do is disconnect from the internal experience, to become emotionally invisible. This pattern, established early, becomes the default setting for handling all subsequent stress in adulthood. The problem, as established in various peer-reviewed research on trauma, is that this wall is non-selective. It keeps the painful feelings out, but it simultaneously seals off the capacity for profound joy, intimacy, and vulnerability. A truly safe life requires the capacity to feel risk, and the wall eliminates all risk by eliminating all feeling. Furthermore, This emptiness isn't passive. It takes effort to maintain the wall. The mind is constantly expending energy to suppress, ignore, and intellectualize feelings that are trying to surface. This leads to the chronic fatigue and lack of focus associated with emotional collapse. Reason 6. You are tired because a significant portion of your mental processing power is dedicated not to living, but to keeping the silence silent. This continuous internal battle is the hidden cost of the numbness, transforming a temporary survival tactic into a heavy, permanent prison. Understanding this mechanism is the first step toward dismantling the wall, recognizing that the numbness is not a flaw. It is a monument to what you once endured. This brings us to the most insidious and often overlooked reason for the emptiness: identity erosion. The numbness you feel is not just the absence of emotion, it's the absence of you. Look back at reason 1 from the original discussion. You have lost yourself. This goes deeper than forgetting hobbies. It's about losing contact with your core values, the internal compass that dictates your choices, passions, and purpose. In the modern landscape, especially in America, we are incentivized to maintain a high-functioning facade that often requires us to betray our own deepest needs. We adopt the values of productivity, wealth accumulation, and social approval, even if they fundamentally clash with our need for creativity, quiet time, or authentic connection. The emptiness you feel is the space between the person you are and the person you have become to survive or succeed. It is the ghost in the machine, the self you abandoned when you decided the performance was more important than the inner life. Many people arrive at this numbness through what I call the quiet tyranny of the shell. They build a perfect shell, a successful career, a beautiful home, a curated social media presence, and dedicate all their energy to maintaining it. But the shell demands silence from the authentic self. The moment your core self speaks up, saying, "I hate this job," or "I need to be alone," it threatens the stability of the shell. So you silence that inner voice. According to psychological models, true self-concept requires consistency between internal beliefs and external behavior. When you consistently act against your genuine desires, the mind fragments. The emotional consequence is that you no longer trust your internal signals, because those signals have been deemed dangerous or impractical. This loss of trust is what makes you feel hollow. You're not just numb to the outside world, you're numb to yourself. The shell functions perfectly, but inside, there is no one home. The silence is the sound of your values waiting to be rediscovered. The final key to understanding this profound emptiness: incorporating reason. 5. Significant loss is recognizing that numbness is often a form of unprocessed grief. Grief, as many clinical models demonstrate, is not reserved for death. It is the natural response to any significant loss. And when you are emotionally numb, you are likely carrying living grief. Grief for things that are not physically gone, but are absent from your current life. The loss of a future you envisioned, the loss of an authentic relationship, or perhaps the deepest loss of all, the loss of time spent living without genuine feeling. When faced with loss, denial is one of the initial protective stages of mourning. Emotional numbness is the manifestation of that denial. You are simply not ready to engage with the agonizing reality of what has been taken or abandoned. Your psyche grants you a temporary stay of execution from the pain, locking the loss away in a cold, quiet room. This gives you the necessary distance to survive the initial shock. However, if you remain in this denial stage for years, the numbness solidifies. The grief doesn't disappear. It simply becomes a heavy, inert weight. Many of the 7 reasons we discussed, abuse, identity loss, burnout, are forms of profound loss. The numbness is merely the emotional footprint they leave behind. I propose we view the emptiness not as a failure, but as the quiet sign. It is a signal, a whisper from the deepest part of your psyche, that something vital has been neglected, abandoned, or suppressed for too long. This sign is not a command to immediately fix everything. It is an invitation to acknowledge, to accept that underneath the silence there is significant, stored pain and loss that deserves your gentle attention. To move past this stage, you must transition from asking, "Why am I broken?" to asking, "What is this numbness protecting me from?" Because that protection, while necessary once, now stands between you and the possibility of a fully felt life. It is time to honor the pain you endured, which built the wall, and recognize that the environment is now safe enough to peek over the top. This shift, from self-criticism to curious observation, is crucial for recovery. If the numbness is a fortress built for protection, the path toward feeling again is not to charge the walls, but to negotiate a peaceful surrender. The core mistake people make is believing they must force feeling, leading to frustration and deeper exhaustion. That is trying to solve a biological shutdown problem with willpower. It simply doesn't work. Based on insights from clinical models like somatic experiencing and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, the starting point for gentle recovery is non-judgmental observation. You must stop fighting the numbness and start observing it. The first step, turning numbness into a mirror. Instead of asking, "Why can't I feel?" ask, "Where in my body does this absence of feeling reside? Is it a tightness in the chest, a hollow sensation in the stomach, a persistent dullness behind the eyes?" The mind often walls off emotions, but the body keeps the score. By simply noticing the physical location of the emptiness, you begin to build a subtle, gentle bridge between your rational self and your feeling self, a process essential for reintegrating dissociation. The second step, the 5-minute inquiry. Dedicate 5 minutes each day, no more, to a practice of silent inquiry. You are not trying to feel joy or sadness. You are simply asking, if the part of me that is blocked could speak, what would it say? This is about granting permission for the suppressed feelings to gently surface, if they choose. You are moving from the position of the guard patrolling the wall to the position of a compassionate listener waiting outside the gate. This practice helps to regulate the nervous system by introducing tiny, manageable moments of awareness rather than overwhelming it with sudden emotional demands. The third step, the search for tiny signals. When the dopamine system is depleted, it cannot handle grand gestures. Forget aiming for overwhelming happiness. Instead, search for micro signals of engagement. Did a piece of music make your shoulders relax for 2 seconds? Did a flavor taste marginally better than usual? Did the texture of a soft blanket provide momentary comfort? These small, momentary shifts are the first whispers of the reward system coming back online. According to research on neuroplasticity, consistently paying attention to these micro moments is how you slowly, gently resensitize the neural pathways. This is the opposite of the high stimulation environment that caused the shutdown in the first place. You are gently recalibrating your emotional volume dial, one tiny click at a time. The aim is not to leap from 0 to 10, but simply to acknowledge the shift from 0 to 1. This deliberate slowness is the kindness your overstressed system truly needs. We have traveled through the silent terrain of emotional numbness. We recognized it as a strategy, a neurological mechanism, and a deep psychological fortress built on past pain. The emptiness is not your fault. It is a monument to what you endured. The ultimate insight here is that the silence is not permanent. You are not broken beyond repair. You are simply exhausted and overprotected. The recovery from emotional numbness is not a sprint toward loud happiness, but a slow, deliberate excavation toward gentle authenticity. It requires a profound act of compassion toward the self that shut down. You must honor the protection mechanism, thank it for its service, and then gently begin to inform it that the danger has passed, and its services are no longer required at full capacity. The goal is not to eliminate all pain or stress. The goal is to expand your emotional capacity so that you can hold both the lows and the highs without collapsing. This is the definition of true emotional resilience. Resilience isn't about being untouchable. It's about being able to feel the full weight of a punch and still maintain your structure. If you carry nothing else away from this discussion, carry this. The path back to feeling is paved with permission, not force. Give yourself permission to be exactly where you are, numb, exhausted, confused. Give yourself permission to not have all the answers. The true work begins in that quiet acceptance. The journey home to the self you lost is simply the act of paying closer attention to your own small, quiet signals. When the frozen water begins to thaw, it does not happen in a violent crack, but in a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. That slow, gradual return to flow is the sound of healing. You are moving beyond the quiet tyranny of the neutral zone, seeking not a fixed resolution, but a dynamic engagement with life's messy, beautiful, and complex flow. The emptiness was a pause. Now you can gently prepare to press play.